But this song is excellent because it picks up a lot of points that are relevant to us. Wolf Biermann was a communist from Hamburg. He was removed from his country because he was such a powerful voice in the former GDR. So I think it'd be nice to sing it. That's why I brought my guitar. And we'll sing it again at the end. When I was young, after a few years of Wolf Biermann having been sent out of the country, that is not allowed back in, when he was on a concert tour, I picked it up and took it up myself on many occasions. So you get the impression. Biermann has gone through many phases since then. He's still writing music. He's no longer the youngest. So I'll begin with the song, When Are We Going to Have Peace Finally?
Der Mensch, der den Menschen bedroht.
Don't let yourself be hardened. Resist, reconcile, transform. And the song we've just heard of Biermann is 60 years old. Sometimes you get the impression it could have been written now, because we're on the brink of the largest, the hugest rearmament of the world. But we've experienced that it's possible to live without armament. We withstood war, and we know that security is a lot better in the East and West. We rose up, and here in the East, that's a point of crystallization. The churches are a place of hope of peace. Resistance in the GDR, in the old days, of course, up till 1989, was linked with resistance for peace. That was linked to the trio of justice, peace, and care for creation. And that's where we come from, the tradition. We heard yesterday about the ecumenical assemblies in the 80s in Eastern Germany. Now, at the moment, the good air of disarmament has disappeared. The headiness after the fall of the wall has passed, and it's amazing because it was impressive. A number of weapons was reduced like anything, 3,000 to 300 missiles in Germany, for example. And to prevent that weapons are sold again, in the 90s, when disarmament went on, the states in Europe were still the greatest arms exporters in the world, and they fueled the armament in the sense that they didn't annihilate their weapons. They sold them. We prayed for freedom, and it came. Now the world is trembling again. Instead of trust and dialogue, there's distrust and selfishness. Violence, untruthfulness, hatred, all of these enter people's hearts. And a lot of the goodwill that was there before has been washed away. And it's difficult to bear that the populists of all hues all over the world are capitalizing on this. So in Germany we have an East-West topic that's linked to 40 years of separate development in the last century, and hence this whole polarization between Ossis and Wessis arose, which didn't exist at all. In the past, there was nothing like that. And the difference would have only been the unemployed on both sides. But strangely, there's a racist element, again, to saying somebody's an Aussie. And the Alternative for Germany hasn't overcome this. They have a nationalist closedness. And there are Nazis, neo-Nazis on both sides, of course, actually, not just in the East. So resistance is called for by us, and we need resistance. Pacifist resistance has gone into crisis through the Ukraine war. Suddenly, everything that seemed clear, for example, not exporting weapons to crisis areas, were thrown out the window. It was thought that there was still the peace dividend, but nevertheless, in NATO, people think, of course, they have to support each other, and actually had to support Ukraine. Realism is called for. Of course, we have to accept the facts. But at the same time, it's interesting that pacifists are insulted when they talk about non-violence as if it's an insult. It's interesting because they say you're heartless, you don't want to deliver weapons, you're a softie, and this will not remain without a trace. And the tension is whether you resist this pressure on you. Now, of course, we could sing "Don't Let Yourself Be Hardened" every time we feel in doubt. I have it on my phone, as a matter of fact, and I can always play it on my guitar. It's from the same period.
In dieser harten Zeit, die allzu hart sind, brechen, die allzu spitzen stechen und brechen ab sogleich, und brechen ab sogleich. Du lass dich nicht verbittern in dieser bitteren Zeit. Die Herrschenden erzittern, sitzt du erst hinter Gittern, doch nicht vor deinem Leid, doch nicht vor deinem Leid. Du lass dich nicht erschrecken in dieser Schreckenszeit. Das wollen sie doch bezwecken, dass wir die Waffen strecken, schon vor dem großen Streit, schon vor dem großen Streit. Du lass dich nicht verbrauchen, gebrauche deine Zeit. Du kannst nicht untertauchen, du brauchst uns und wir brauchen grad deine Heiterkeit, grad deine Heiterkeit. Wir wollen es nicht verschweigen in dieser Schweigenszeit. Das Grün bricht aus den Zweigen, wir Wir wollen es allen zeigen, dann wissen sie Bescheid. Dann wissen sie Bescheid. Wenn wir uns diese Liedstrophen angucken, dann
So if we have a look at all this, it's interesting to see it from our Christian perspective. It wasn't a Christian song. It was written in a totalitarian communist situation by a very sober, hard-headed communist. But in terms of the words, it suits us very much. Now, where he says, don't let us, this can be compared to the Beatitudes, where Jesus says, may this be blessed. It's a kind of subjunctive. We could call this the basic tone of pacifism, that is meekness, and the peace that was promised by Jesus is to be spread all over the world. That's what Christians want. And it says, the peace shall inherit the earth. It's not the violent people, the meek. And I've noticed that in all these sharp discussions and arguments, there's no point in raising a voice and saying, I'm like you, I can shout too. You might feel tempted to, but inwardly it's much better to remain quiet inside, gentle, so that the other can perhaps think twice about what they're saying. Especially if they're a Christian, that they might at least admit your honesty and you admit their honesty, of course. I've noticed that that's effective. From the first great crisis within the Protestant church in Germany itself, this big group of 20 churches, but also in the council, the high-up people, if you talk quietly to them, they're impressed. Some people say in the struggle for peace, some people are more interested in the fight. That's a bit sarcastic. I think that's not the idea. It's work, really, and that's typically Protestant, isn't it? Work. When you set up your kitchen and then you wash everything up afterwards, you see the results. And it's only when you don't do it that you see even more. And I think that's important, rather than leaving a mess behind us, that we should try every day to counter this work of hatred and maliciousness and sarcasm, and just be gentle in answering, and friendly, and answering people quietly. So blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And he then, Biermann continues, don't be too sharp. This is the third line in the first verse. Now remember, when you're a child, you remember what it's like to be stung or pricked. And sometimes that happens in political argument. We say we're for peace, and the second is we've never committed crimes in a war. That's the other side. You can say whatever you like, you throw it all in the ring. Some people bring this out of the First World War, saying it was a good war and so on. It says here, if you are pricked, it'll be too hard. So don't forget that it should be in coordination with the mercy here. And then if we keep a merciful heart, frequently it's unbearable for the other side. They can't grasp it. They don't know what's happening. If you're arguing about Ukraine or the Gaza Strip, of course we don't see much of what goes on in Congo or Sudan, unfortunately. There's one thing we've learned in the pacified countries we're in, and we were successful pacifists. You can't say that we can't create peace. We have created peace since the war. Many of our standard phrases have become standard for that reason. We're used to peace, but the strange thing is the brutality of this war is no longer shown to us because it would deplausibilize the war. Brutal machine-like killing of people can't be labeled fighting for peace, defending democracy. Mowing down, butchering people, that's a different thing. It's intolerable. And I think mercifulness, compassion, makes it clear that we should use different arguments to counter violence. It's about seeing individuals as people, persons as such, and not as numbers. The life of one person, according to the UN, is worth living, and according to the UN Constitution, you don't have to go to war. And the question of whether we need to defend, is it appropriate, these take on a different ring as soon as you start thinking about the loss of life involved, and I think we should argue in terms of human life and instead of human security as such. Now, reading through the whole song, read it from the first verse. Don't let yourself be hardened in these hard times. Those that are too hard break, all that are too sharp prick and break off immediately. Now, don't let yourself be embittered in these bitter times. Now, sometimes you can't even open your mouth because you feel so terrible. For example, in Germany, sometimes people are rendered speechless by Israel and Gaza, especially as they feel, because of their history of the Holocaust, they can't say anything about Israel anyway. And as soon as they get critical of the way Israel is behaving in Gaza, they get into trouble from their Jewish colleagues. And people say to us in the church, why don't you say anything about Israel? We have said something, but it's not good enough for the media. That's why it doesn't come through. And then it goes on, once you're behind bars, the rulers will tremble, but not from your suffering. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Another beatitude. Here Jesus told us that, a good piece of advice. And we should be poor in spirit in the sense, in German it says pure in heart is perhaps a better translation. Pure in heart. Now, most people don't go to prison if they're pacifists nowadays. It used to be different. And that's a wonderful achievement. And people from the ultra-right-wing area think that it would be dictatorship if people had to go to the army. And the Bread for the World conducted a survey about the concept of freedom. There's no country in the world that has a completely free civil society. We've gone down a step or a peg because journalists have been physically injured at Monday demonstrations, and Bavarian police recently tackled demonstrators who were just demonstrating for their own opinion. So Germany has been demoted in the scale, but it's not a dictatorship. But the AfD thinks they're in a dictatorship. That's how they talk. They don't like any rules. And I think we made that clear yesterday when thumbs went up or down to see how strong you feel in civil society. And it's not a matter of wanting to get into disagreement with the government and putting your head on the block, as it were. We want to remain in conversation. And Jesus said, you know that you will be pursued for the sake of righteousness, or justice in German. And then, of course, massive conflicts can arise about these issues. And that will always make the rulers tremble, as the second verse of the song says. Once you're behind bars, they'll tremble, but not from your suffering. And then it says, don't let yourself be frightened in these times of terror. In these times of terror, that's what they want to achieve, that we lay down our arms even before the great battle. For us Christians, that's no option. We're not thinking of crossing swords, not in the least, when you talk of our arms. These are non-violent arms. There's a concept people have been using about law-abiding force, and that was meant to allow for police or robust intervention by the UN or something like that. But it's a bit paradoxical to talk of law-abiding force, because the same word in German, force, is allein force and violence. And I would not contest. I'm not such a total pacifist that I wouldn't say we shouldn't defend our country. If we were attacked tomorrow, I think there have to be exceptions. But things like this have to happen with moderation. And it mustn't be deceptive armament. For example, Germany now says it wants to have the biggest conventional army. That's not necessary for defense. That's preparation for attack. And we learned from Ukraine that the small country can keep the other at bay with only a fifth of their power. And that's the interesting debate that we have to wage, because military people can use their special knowledge, but at the same time, the weapons, of course, are quite different with drones nowadays and missiles, so you don't know where you're going to be attacked from. That's why we're not going to take up arms at all. But we have this wonderful text in one of Paul's letters with reference to the Roman Empire. He knew the peoples, and he sets up the concept of spiritual armor. Ephesians 6, there it says, at the end, you have God's armor. That strengthens you. And then he talks about the shield and the helmet of hope and faith, the sword, all these different elements connected with faith. It's a form of protection, but a spiritual protection. Not to be poisoned and to become hopeless. And that way, defending yourself against the last day or the evil hour, If you have spiritual alertness, you'll be ready. Then peace comes. In the story that Paul tells, there comes righteousness, the sword of the Spirit, the shield of hope, the helmet of faith, and so on and so forth. Can understand all this. It's clear you want to have a decent armor on, that your trousers don't fall down, or the tank of righteousness. Der Panzer in German also means shield and tank. Sorry. And that's to protect your heart from breaking. So the shield of righteousness, the armor of righteousness, the shield of faith, etc. Mixed up here, sorry. And the helmet of salvation, because you shouldn't be confused. That's the whole point. The salvation of peace, as it were. And the sword of the Spirit, as I say, it's important. A short one, we would say. It's not a proper sword. They all had a bit of a sword in those days to accompany Jesus against the robbers. And then it gets complicated. Then it says, peace will come. It's not in comparable text. It's only in this one. And there it says, put on the sandals of readiness for the gospel of peace. Put on the sandals of readiness for the gospel of peace. My God, how complicated peace is. And I think that this readiness for peace, which isn't yet peace, it's not a matter of having it or having the solution. It's being ready for it. And that seems to me a central point, so that we can cling to that we keep our feet on the path of peace and don't drop this readiness for peace. And before the great experience, we can sum this up in the war, the language. You can say, I'm for defense, I'm for the freedom of Ukraine. And that's why I think that's our task, to make our readiness great. And that's why we can't assume that it's taken literally, where we say we lay down our arms. And then it goes, and don't let yourself be worn down. Use your time. You can't go underground. You need us, and we need your cheerfulness right now. And all this armament will be in vain when Jesus comes again, of course. And questions of social justice, of sharing, participation in society, all of this is not possible with all the money going into armament. And that's why I think it's a central point for us to trust that the kingdom of God will move towards something that's here already and that shines up every so often. And here it says, we don't want to keep it quiet in this time of silence. The green is bursting from the branches. We want to show everyone so they know. That's the last verse. And that way we'll resist nationalism, the poisoning of hearts, and not be told that that was wrong or what we're saying is fake or false. It's true. Disarmament is possible. Trust can grow. Security will only be possible together and not against each other. Now, the great encouragement of Wolf Biermann, he says at the beginning, don't let yourself be hardened, that's small scale, and then the major encouragement.
Mein Freund, dir kann ich sagen, ich bin müde, hundemüde. Müde bin ich all die Tage, die mich hart und härter machten. Ach, mein Herz ist krank von all der Politik und all den Schlachten. Sag, wann haben diese Leiden, diese Leiden, diese Leiden endlich mal ein Ende? Wenn die neuen Leiden kommen, haben sie ein Ende. Liebe, meine Schöne, du mit deinen warmen Armen, hieltest du mich all die Nächte, die nur kältere Kälten brachten. Ach, mein Herz ist krank von all der Politik und all den Schlachten. Wann haben diese Leiden, diese Leiden, diese Leiden endlich mal ein Ende? Wenn die neuen Leiden kommen, haben sie ein Ende.
Well, that was a great encouragement. After suffering, Biermann sang of love. I think it's most intriguing to look at the figure of Christ and to ask what we do as Christians and say that Christ, the Son of God, represented love that became flesh and came into a country that was occupied and called men and women onto the path of peace. And he succeeded in integrating murderers into his group who would have just gone ahead every 10 minutes and murdered someone. Or in the story of Thomas, which fortunately is not in the Bible, there's an interesting parable where Jesus says the kingdom of God belongs to attackers, and the wall is stuck in, the knife is stuck in the wall, and the person simply goes ahead and kills. He's very brutal, describing, that is Thomas, in this apocryphal gospel. And he sees this individual in the gospel, thinks that he can succeed with a knife, and he climbs a hill and looks down at Jerusalem and realizes he'll not make it with a knife. That's not the way. And even God was not successful because the crucifixion was not a sign of victory. And that's where reconciliation lies. The secret is that God took the guilt upon himself, that God gave himself. And that way, a peace movement was sparked that works right up until today. And ultimately, wants to possess the earth in its meekness. But it's most comforting to realize that Jesus was tempted in some ways to use violence because he was frustrated and he knew difficult times would come and he knew it wouldn't get any easier. Nor did he promise that to anyone else. But to celebrate Christ's atoning act, we know that we should practice reconciliation in stressful situations. I found that difficult yesterday. We're listening to two people who were talking. One was from Ukraine, the other one was the Nobel Prize winner, and the one from Norway, who's in, Russia, who's in prison, and a Ukrainian said he can't talk to a Russian on principle, but she did talk to him apparently on this occasion. So reconciliation is possible. That's something we should realize and hope for it and believe in it and have compassionate hearts. And ultimately, we will not respond to hatred with hate. And that can only come from the hope, from the heart of someone who really believes it and who'd suffered greatly and had reason to hate. So the last point is transformation in our trio. It's our job to change things with resistance, bring about reconciliation, and finally there's transformation, to overcome hate with love. At the same time, however, I think in a lot of the way we think, transformation is for everybody, by the way. It's not just for Christians. There are many people who are our fellow travelers, even if they're not Christians. And in our church here, we find old-fashioned building blocks of faith turn up every so often. You say that's all right for Christians, they understand that, nobody else would. If the world is different, you have to look to see how we can explain things. Crucifixion, so on, has to be interpreted. But the kingdom of God is one that will overcome all, and all the countries in the earth will be embraced by it. And we, the non-violent, working towards this. That's what we're doing. That's our goal. And I think we're in good company. And so cooperation can be sought with many other groups at the same time. At the same time, the question of peace in the Middle East is tricky at the moment because it's so loaded and fraught. It's very difficult when there is contempt for people involved. And it's another problem, as it were, where we have to work. And we're called for to make our contribution. So that way we're on the road, we'll resist, we'll achieve reconciliation, and we'll try to transform it and turn the world into God's kingdom. So I'm going to wrap up with another song from the East. Oh, it's from further east, this time from Israel. There's a lovely verse. Weakness is overcome by love, and powerlessness as well.
Eines Tages, so spricht Micha, ragt der Gottesberg so hoch. alles große Macht und Mächte kehrt herab wie Schnee ins Joch. Schwachheit siegt durch Liebe, sie kommt im Ohnmachtskleid. Tag um Tag und Nacht um Nacht bringt sie die neue Zeit. Gottes Friedensspur ins Weite, schmaler Pfad im Land der Armen. Doch wir gehen ihn schon heute, dorthin, wo auch du anlangst. Völker, Rassen aller Klassen wandern aus dem alten Zeit hin zum Berge neuer Hoffnung, Liebe und Gerechtigkeit. Neues Ziel, die Liebe, sie kommt im Ohnmachtskleid. Schritt um Schritt folgt jenem Weg ins Land der neuen Zeit. Gottes Friedensspur ins Weite, klarer Pfad im Land der Anden. Doch wir gehen ihn schon heute, dorthin, wo auch du anlangst. Von den Bergen hört den leisen Ruf des Friedens in ihr Welt. Friedensstifter Gott, der Richter, hat euch in sein Land bestellt. Frieden, das ist Liebe, sie kommt im Ohnmachtskleid. Wort für Wort ruft ihr uns hin ins Land der neuen Zeit. Gottes Friedensspur ins Weite, schmaler Pfad im Land der Armen. Doch wir gehen ihn schon heute, dorthin, wo auch du anlangst. Eisenhärte schmiedet flüssig, biegt das Schwert zum Friedenspflug, spießt der Rache in die Gluten, Ende allen Waffentrug. Endlich da die Liebe, sie kommt im Ohnmachtskleid. Aug um Aug und Zahn um Zahn hört auf in neuer Zeit. Gottes Liebe hoch ins Weite, schmaler Pfad im Land der Angst. Doch wir gehen ihn schon heute, dorthin, wo auch du anlangst. Fern die Fremde, nah die Heimat, Frucht des Friedens wird als Land. Jeder ernten ohne Feinde, wie es Gott für uns ersann. Er ist unsere Liebe, er kommt im Ohnmachtskleid. Hand in Hand stehen Freund und Feind im Land der neuen Zeit. Gottes Friedensspur ins Weite, schmaler Pfad im Land der Armen. Doch wir gehen ihn schon heute, dorthin, wo auch du